A Kitsune in a Remnant by Red Devil 360, Chapter 17. Goodbye? Naruto groaned as he shook himself awake. His head pounded and the rest of his body ached like he'd just been in a fistfight with the Kyuubi. He surveyed the area and noticed immediately the utter heap it was. The front of the train was crushed and he was thankful to have been thrown to the back. It also seemed to be upside down, judging by the fact that what remained of the control was now on the ceiling. Shoving the sheets of metal and debris off him, he stood and immediately swayed as a wave of nausea rushed over him. Putting a hand to his head, he felt around and felt a large cut running across his forehead. It came away wet, probably a concussion as well. "What's up, Fox?" he questioned internally. "A minor concussion and some bruised ribs. You'll be fine in an hour or so, but your control will be out of whack for a little bit," Kurama replied. "How bad we talking?" he wondered, looking around the destroyed compartment for his katana, finding it sticking out of a small pile of rubble unscratched. "Nothing major, but I'd hesitate in performing any major jutsu in case they blow up in your face," the demon recommended, and the shinobi nodded with a sigh. He was strong with or without his jutsu. Now that there was nothing he was really could other than wait for it to heal, he steadily and carefully felt out for the door and dropped into the next cart, which was similarly destroyed. The carriage door was blocked, which meant he had to keep traveling through the train. He decided, however, to change back into his Jonin uniform in case he came across anybody searching the carts, of course making it look as though he actually fought in it. It was a few minutes before he heard people talking. It was outside the train, and as he moved closer to the wall, the voice became louder. He took a step back and looked at the wall. No door. With a sigh and a shrug, he drew his katana and stabbed it into the metal work. The voices outside stopped immediately. With concentration and an application of wind chakra, he cut a hole roughly the size of his body and kicked it out, causing sunlight to shine in. Damn, his control really was out of whack. He sheathed his sword and stepped out into the sun and winced as his eyes hurt. How long had he been out? It was nearly midday. "Halt! Stay where you are, and keep your hands where we can see them," a voice ordered, and Naruto lowered his arm to see an entire plaza of Elysian soldiers pointing their guns at him. There were even bullheads overhead. Shit, did they figure it out? He quickly surveyed the area and noticed the destruction around. No, this wasn't him. Something else happened, which was why they were here. It was just a coincidence he exited here. Great. "Fox, we may have a problem," he asked mentally. "Working on it, brat," was the short growled response, and he felt his body heat up and tingle as more of the fox's chakra coursed through his body. Naruto narrowed his eyes and placed his arms palm up at his sides. "We're currently on the same side. What have I done that causes an entire platoon of soldiers to aim their guns at me?" Naruto stalled as his mind was running through options of what's going on. "You are under suspicion of covert operations against the Kingdom of Atlas and the assassination of General Ironwood. Come with us quickly and you'll be treated fairly," one soldier stated, obviously a higher rank, as he stepped forward, reaching for a pair of cuffs on his belt. "If you even think of touching me, it'll be the last thing you do," Naruto growled, his patience beginning to wear. He lowered his arms and purposely shoved them, moving towards his pouch and katana. "That is enough, gentlemen. As our ally said here, we're all on the same side." A new voice broke through the clear tension in the plaza. Naruto didn't even move his head, and he glanced at Aspen, Glinda, and Crow stepping off a landing bullhead. "You mind telling me what happened, Oz? 'Cause right now it seems as though the war's back to kick off again," Naruto said, his hand now wrapped around the hilt of his katana and the hand in his pouch, the ring of a kunai barely peeking through. "Done, kid," the voice spoke in his mind, and he immediately felt his chakra return and the foxes recede. As soon as he regained control, a presence settled over the area and everyone suddenly found it harder to breathe. "Talk," he stated simply. Aspen held up his hand in a friendly gesture. "There was a incident. Ironwood is dead." Naruto snorted and nodded at the small army still aiming at him. "I was told. What do you want me to do? Cry for him?" "No, some people are of the opinion that you were the one to kill him." "You serious?" I was at Mount Glen. We literally talked about it. You even told me where to look, Naruto asked with an incredulous tone. I was in that for most of the night, thank you very much, and if you hadn't noticed, it was a particularly rough ride, he said, gesturing to the ruined train behind him. Of course, but we know you have the ability to use clones, not to mention other shinobi abilities we may not be aware of, Crow countered, hands in his pockets. For starters, old man, back off, I can smell your alcoholism from here. Take a shower. Second, I am generally considered a master of the Kagebunshin, and my range only extends from here to the edge of Beacon, he explained. They have a range? Aspen inquired calmly. Naruto nodded slowly, not pleased about how to explain this. Normal clones made out of, say, water or earth only need a latent source of chakra to keep their form. This is usually the chakra the user used to create them. They are thus inferior, Aspen guessed. Naruto nodded again. Shadow clones are made of pure chakra instead of an elemental template, therefore they need a constant connection to the user to retain their shape. He neglected to mention about the fact that they could transfer memories. He didn't need to know that. However, they are much more versatile and are capable of thinking and acting independently. You can teleport, Glenda retorted. The Shunshin, at the nod, he continued, it isn't really teleporting. We just move really fucking quickly, so it seems like it. We use our chakra to vitalize our body to move at great speeds. However, we can't go somewhere we've never been before or risk ending up in a wall or something. Not to mention the chakra consumption to get from here to Mount Glen would likely commoditize me. It wouldn't. He simply didn't want to waste chakra before getting into a fight. Aspen hummed and kept his eyes off on the shinobi before him. Naruto tightened his grip. He turned to the soldiers who originally spoke. Lower your weapons, he ordered, and Naruto mentally breathed a sigh of relief. Headmaster, he questioned. Our friend here is not the killer, Aspen stated. Lower your weapons. The soldier grunted and did so. The others followed suit, albeit with a little grumbling. Thank you. You may now return to your previous duties. We can handle this from here. This time they followed immediately, and the platoon slowly filed out of the plaza. Only when the last man left did Naruto release his weapon and slightly relax. Shni, Naruto questioned. Unfortunately, we tried to talk her out of it, but she was adamant. Where is she now? Atlas is in disarray. She's temporarily stepping into the role to try and organize it, Aspen remarked as he stepped closer with the others. Naruto sighed and looked around. What happened? The train crashed, creating a breach. Grim started pouring into the city, Aspen explained. Oh, were many hurt? Naruto questioned, looking around again. There were casualties, but the breach was contained quickly, Aspen reassured, and Naruto nodded. You missed one? Aspen asked. So it seems, Naruto grunted. Did you find a body? No. What about Roman? We're still scouring the train, but so far nothing. I didn't see his friend. If you haven't found him, then I doubt you will at all. It was quiet for a time. It wasn't. I wasn't kidding about the war kicking off again, Naruto muttered as he began walking to the waiting bulkhead. Austin blinked. Excuse me? He questioned sharply, following quickly behind the others, rather alarmed as well. Naruto remained silent as he boarded. The ride back was silent and tense. The threat of war lay heavily in the air, and every minute the beacon grew closer. Naruto stewed more and more. They arrived quickly and waited for them as a group of people. Foremost were his teammate in winter. He stepped off the bullhead and immediately strode towards the waiting people. His teammates made to greet him, but he sent them a look, and they stopped in their tracks, confusion written on their faces. Enter General Schnee, he greeted icily, not even glancing at the wreck of Ironwood's former flagship. A missionary Kitsune, Winter replied just as cold. The use of titles sent a chill around the observers. We have much to discuss, she quietly spoke. No, we don't, he hissed, taking out a scroll and chucking it to their side. In a puff of smoke, the large machine he fought earlier appeared in the beacon courtyard. Winter didn't react in the slightest to the untrained eye, but the slight widening of her eyes and the tension of her muscles gave it away. What is this? She asked calmly. You tell me, Interim General. After all, it has the Atlesian seal on it, Naruto revealed, causing a few gasps to arise from the audience. I have no idea what you're talking about, she sniffed. Really? Then I'm sure you won't mind if I take this and relay it to my findings to the Kages. Naruto causing Winter to flinch. What does he mean? Ruby asked nervously as she watched the proceedings with the other students. Part of the stipulation of the truce was that the elemental nations wouldn't take part in any covert operations against Remnant. Atlas would cease any research until a treaty is formally signed. Ozpin murmured quietly as he watched the proceedings with a critical eye. "This means," he sighed sadly, wondering what his friend had done. "This means that the elemental nations will have a valid reason to head back into war with Remnant," Naruto finished. He looked at Ozpin behind him. "And you invited me into your backyard." The implications were left hanging in the air. Winter coughed into her hand. I won't have to talk with the council about this. I assure you whoever is responsible will be discovered and severely punished," she reassured, heading to the mech that was until it disappeared. "I'm sure. However, until then I shall keep this on hand, just in case there happens to be an accident." Naruto commented snidely. Winter looked anything but happy, but the saying no would undoubtedly make things worse, so she settled with a single nod and turned and walked away, her guards following. Naruto looked around at the spectators before disappearing from their eyes. Naruto set his rucksack on the bed, most of his clutter now cleared and sealed away in case he needed to make a swift escape. The only thing not sealed was his desk, where a few scrolls still sat across the woodmark. Currently he was writing a report to Kakashi about the final shinobi deaths, the train, and what he found, the successful assassination of Ironwood, and finally the Atlesian machine. He also left a footnote on the possibility of there being tunnels underneath the city. It was a lengthy report, and took a whole hour to make. Sure, he included all the details which could be important, like the fact that there was an underground entrance to the city of Vale. There was a knock at the door. "This isn't just my room," Naruto called out with an eye roll. Did they think he was suddenly he was going to go berserk and start killing people or something? The door opened and the two sisters teams walked in. "We thought you might like to be alone for some time," Blake explained. "If I didn't want to be found, you wouldn't find me," Naruto stated, finishing his report and adding a chakra seal onto his report so that they could identify it as his. "Why is your bag packed?" Ruby obviously noticed the scarcity of his side of the room and the bag on the bed. "Because if I need to leave, I need to do so immediately." He bit his thumb and pressed a hand on the table, causing a small toad to appear in a puff of smoke. "To the office of the Kage, please," he calmly requested while handing over the rolled up report and a small chocolate bar. The toad nodded and disappeared. "What was that?" Yang questioned. "A messenger toad summon," Naruto answered, and he stood from his chair and stretched his aching back. "Why did you give it the chocolate, though?" she asked again. "Summons are prideful creatures in their own right. Their chakra pools and pathways allow them their own brand of sentience than from normal creatures. Some may say they are smarter and wiser than us humans because of the different way they see the world," Naruto began. "Some of the more powerful summons wish for a price when they are summoned for a task. Good summons like my toads only request some sort of treat like chocolates. Other more corrupt summons like the snakes demand sacrifices for being summoned." A few in the room paled a little at the thought. "Nasty," he agreed with a nod. "Now I can tell something is bothering you. I can probably guess why." "Is there really going to be another war?" Pyro asked in concern. "That is not up to me. That is up to the Kage and what the kingdom of Atlas is not willing to give up to avoid another one." "And how likely is that exactly?" Blake asked tentatively. Naruto sighed and rubbed his eyes tiredly. "If there's one thing we both have in common is that we're both extremely prideful when we really don't need to be." Glancing at Whis, who had the decency to blush. "If we're lenient, if Atlas were willing to give ground, then maybe not. However, if we want it, if Atlas were going to continue to dig in the hills, then maybe yes. If it turns out that SDC have had a hand in it." He left the final part unsaid. "And will you participate if it comes to that?" Ren asked. Naruto's gaze drifted over those gathered. "I'm a soldier, Ren," was all he said on the matter. "Now if you excuse me, I've got to do some training," and with that he left. Naruto calmly walked through the katas of the Uzumaki katana style. It apparently focused on wild, unpredictable kata attacks and unrelenting force to defeat their opponents. Perfect for him. He usually preferred the ninjato for its speed, which was his foremost ability. However, more recently he had begun liking the O-katana his mother had left behind him for the weight, which gave him more power in his strikes. He was originally meant to receive it when he turned Chunin, but since he left after the Sasuke retrieval mission and was promoted straight to Anbu Jonin upon his return, he had gotten it then, but he had already trained in the ninjato and had no use for it. Well, that was had he said in any case. He didn't want to use it originally because it reminded him of a mother that he never had. He had always had male role models, the Sandem as a grandfather, Kakashi as a strange elder brother, and Jiraiya as a father. Some could say that Tsunade could fill the mother role, but she was exactly a great influence. Come to think about it, none of his adopted family were. Jiraiya was a self-proclaimed super perfect. Kakashi was in a never ending depressing loop over what happened in his youth. Not to mention his was always 3 hours late things, and the Samden was simply too old to step into the role of Hokage after the death of his father. He wasn't able to control the civilian council, and they gained too much power, which was still being wrestled from them today. Never mind how he handled Donzo. Naruto slipped in the final form and slightly overextended his overhead swipe. He sighed and shook his head slightly. He needed to get those thoughts out of his head. He closed his eyes again and continued through the movements of the style, finishing in a wide swipe, but stopped midway. He opened his eyes and saw Ruby standing in front of him. The edge of his sword had disappeared into her hairline, but he knew he hadn't cut her. "Does your sister know you just did that?" he commented mildly, and he withdrew his sword. Ruby cocked her head to the side. "Nope. Just how sharp is your sword, anyway?" "Sharp enough," he commented, and sheathed it. "What is it?" He looked at her curiously. She looked down and shuffled slightly before stepping into his chest and wrapping her small arms around him. "I don't want you to leave," she whispered. "I want you to stay, please." She tightened her grip around him. Naruto sighed and gritted his teeth for a moment. "Ruby, I won't have much of a choice in the matter. My obligations are first and foremost to Konoha and the elemental nations. You are my friend, no question about it, Ruby, but I can't stay no matter how much you or I wish to." Naruto returned the embrace and gently walked them over to the wall. When he sat them down together, the younger girl tucked underneath his arm. "You're my best friend," she admitted quietly. Naruto's heart clenched painfully at the thought. His first best friend tried to kill him and ended up killing his fiancée, while he doubted Ruby could even bring herself to harm a rabbit. The thought still brought back memories. "Not Whis," he replied after a little while. "Whis isn't leaving," she muttered with a small blush. Naruto raised his eyebrow at that, but made no comment. "She's helped me with training as well as my studies, like you have, perhaps even more so, but you were my first friend and beacon. You're my partner in arms. You saved my life," she continued. "It isn't fair." Naruto sighed again and looked at the ceiling. "Ruby, you are young, but you must know by now life is far from fair." Ruby sniffed. "My mother." She trailed off, and Naruto patted her head in comfort. He had already heard the story from Yang. "My parents," Naruto said quietly. Ruby paused, then looked at him. "You're an orphan?" she asked in surprise. "Mm-hmm. The day I was born, a demon attacked our village. They both sacrificed their lives for mine," he told her. "Do you miss them?" "I miss my mom. Well, what I remember. Yang remembers more than I do." Naruto laughed dryly. "I can't miss what I never had. In fact, I only found out who they really were a few years ago." "What? Why?" Ruby exclaimed. "They were very strong people and had many enemies. It had to be kept a secret until I was strong enough to protect myself, so their enemies wouldn't try and get back at them through me." "That's stupid," Ruby snorted. "Why would they hurt a kid to get revenge on people already dead?" "Because humans are emotional creatures. We do irrational things when we are upset or angry," he explained. "Don't we?" he teased, flicking the girl's ear, causing her to blush in embarrassment. It went quiet, and Ruby tucked herself in closer to the shinobi. I still don't want you to leave, Ruby said again, causing Naruto to snort. Tell you what, he began. We only have one lesson tomorrow, don't we? How about we go to that bakery in the Vale and go eat some fresh cookies and strawberry cheesecake, he asked. Really? Ruby squealed, her eyes almost lighting up with stars. Sure, it'll be our little bestie getaway. Naruto smirked with a wink. Ruby's smile lit up the training room as she glommed the shinobi, this time in glee, and Naruto allowed a smile to cross his face. Come what may, he should enjoy himself while he could. Naruto sat on the wall in the moonlight, peacefully sketching away at nothing in particular. His thoughts, on the other hand, were anything but peaceful. Word had come through he had to leave tonight. He was outside the dorms as he waited for everyone to fall asleep. The only ones he usually had to wait for were Blake and Ren, notorious night owls and early risers. Now, however, he only had to wait up for someone else to go to sleep, and they were on their way to him now. Come out, Para. You should know by now you can't hide from me, he called, not stopping in his drawing. Para chuckled weakly from the roof door and stepped out into the open, dressed in casual jeans and a t-shirt. Sorry, you looked so nice there, I didn't want to disturb you, she replied meekly, hugging herself. Naruto shrugged and patted the place next to him. I'm only drawing. Besides, you must have come up here for a reason, he reasoned once again, patting the place next to him when Pyro didn't move originally. Pyro smiled shyly and took the spot. I just wanted to talk, she said with a small shrug. Naruto chuckled and put down his pencil. It's past midnight and you just want to talk? He smiled and shrugged himself, placing his sketchbook to his side. Well, I know you tend to stay up late, and I myself possibly wanted you all to myself, she admitted with a small blush. All to yourself, Getting greedy, are we? Naruto jibbed lightly, poking her in the side, getting a small squeak out of her. Ticklish too, he laughed with mischievous clear as day dancing in his eyes. Don't you dare, she warned before bursting into laughter as Naruto launched an assault on her sides. He continued until she was red-faced and panting in exhaustion. Naruto was actually scared that she might pass out. The activity lulled into silence as they both just stared out into the beacon grounds bathed in moonlight. Why are you really here, Para? Naruto asked finally with a glance at his companion. Para hugged herself again, but this time out of cold rather than nervousness. When she shivered, Naruto, being the gentleman he is, took off his flak jacket and draped it over her shoulders. There are seals in it to warm you, he explained, gaining a grateful smile from the redhead. Para sighed and began. I've been blessed with incredible talents and opportunities. I've continuously surrounded by love and praise. But when you're placed on a pedestal like that for so long, you become separated from the people that put you there in the first place. Everyone assumes I'm too good for them, that I'm a level they simply can't attain. She spoke sadly, but Naruto said nothing and let her continue. It's becoming impossible to form any sort of meaningful relationships with people, she whispered and hugged herself tightly. That's why I'm so drawn to you. When we met, you didn't know who I was, nor did you care. You treated me just as another stranger, and soon another friend, and thanks to you, I've made friends that will last me a lifetime. Pyra finished with more passion and a bright smile on her face. I don't want you to leave because I think you'll take a piece of me with you if you do, she whispered. Naruto just kept looking at her. I can't stay, he whispered to her. It's too late. He glanced at the corner where his pack sat aside, waiting. Pyra followed his gaze, and her eyes widened in shock before her head snapped back to the shinobi. No, please, she whispered. Tears had begun gathering, but Naruto didn't budge. Pyra, he soothed, bringing her into a hug. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Pyra nodded in acceptance and brought herself closer to the shinobi. Just let me have this then, she asked, burying her face into his neck and mask. Naruto smiled and nodded in acceptance, moving them off the wall so they could sit against it instead. Pyra pretty much melted into Naruto at this point. They stayed there quietly for nearly 20 minutes. Pyra tugged tightly against the blonde with her hands wrapped tightly around his midsection, Naruto's around her waist, and one gently caressed her hair. By the 20-minute mark, Pyra had been lulled into sleep, leaving Naruto to carry her back to her dorm and sneakily tucking her into bed, leaving his jacket as a parting gift. He turned to the roof a few moments later and retrieved his bag, and he jumped off into the darkness, never once looking back. Ruby woke up early with a large grin plastered on her face. Today was the day she went out with Naruto to Vale. She may not be as perceptive as Blake or Whis, but when she jumped down from her bunk, she noticed a distinct lack of someone. In fact, there was a lack of anything to do with said person. His second desk was gone, his spare shinobi uniform were missing from the open cupboard, and the pack on the bed was replaced by a simple piece of paper with writing on it, "Ruby, what's wrong?" She must have made some sort of noise in distress, because not a few moments later both Yang and Blake were up and out of their beds confused. "He's gone. He left. Just like that," she muttered, looking at the note crestfallen. "Who?" Yang questioned sheepishly before too noticing the note and the missing shinobi. "Oh, why would he just leave without saying goodbye?" Ruby cried. The door flew open and Nora rushed into the room, still in her pajamas. "Hey, have you guys seen—" She cut herself off when she saw the commotion. "Oh," she said, unnaturally subdued. "Well, there's something you might want to see," she said, gesturing to her own dorm. Yang and Blake followed while Ruby picked up the note, but avoided reading it and entered soon after. There, sitting on her bed, was Pyra. However, it was the flak jacket that caught her eyes. It was clearly Kitsune's. "I went up to the roof last night to talk to Kitsune. He gave this to me when I got cold. He didn't take it back," Pyra whispered, her own eyes locked onto the warm green of the jacket. "He left a note," Ruby says quietly, holding it up. "What does it say?" Pyra asked, coming out of the bathroom, of course fully dressed and immaculately already. Ruby looked down at the paper and began reading. "Dear treasured friends, I'm sorry. Leaving Beacon, and consequently you, was something I had been dreading since I first befriended you, whether had it been months later or at the end of the 4 years. Unfortunately, it was the former. I am first and foremost a shinobi of Konoha, and my loyalty to my village is absolute. Truly, I wish there were any other way, but things in life don't always go our way. My time with you has been some of my best spent despite the mishaps, and if I return at the head of an army, then I plead that you can forgive me for what I will undoubtedly do. I'm sorry to leave without saying goodbye, but look under your beds." Ruby paused in reading, and everyone scrambled to their beds. Ruby had a box filled with cookies and a cheesecake from the bakery they were planning on visiting, and a frosted red rose with a small picture of a chibi kitsune with his thumbs up. She blushed crimson. Blake received a small collection of orange books. She too blushed when she began reading the contents and swiftly shoved them back under the bed. Yang received a book on fitness training and a small bottle of whiskey. She liked it when it burned. Nora received on how to make her own pancake recipe. Ren received a book on how to control people on sugar highs and meditation. Weiss also received a white rose similar to Ruby's and a small box of expensive tea from an elemental nation Naruto had originally brought but never drank. And Pyra received a golden necklace with seals inscribed into it. A note explained it was an improvement on the ring he had already made for her, and that she could keep the jacket. The letter continued, "I doubt this will completely absolve my absence, but I hope it's a start. Goodbye, Uzumaki Naruto, Jonin of Konoha and student of Beacon, member of Team RWBY." "Uzumaki Naruto," Ruby whispered. "Didn't he say that Uzumaki was his last name? Wouldn't that make Naruto his first?" Pyra deduced, gazing in wonder at the beautiful necklace gifted to her. "I remember him saying that one point that they placed their last names first when introducing themselves as a way to pay homage to their family. They're basically saying that the family is more important than the individual," Blake quietly explained. "It's a cultural thing because the elemental nation's main leaders come from large names. Because of the clan and feudal society, family name is generally more recognizable and respected than a personal name even over here, such as mine. Over there, if we hadn't caused so much trouble, I'd be known and respected as Schnee Weiss rather than Weiss Schnee over here. Weiss continued along, making sure Ruby didn't see the rose as she re-entered the room. Similar to my name, Lyran, the now similar boy commented, causing both Weiss and Blake to nod in agreement. The room lapsed into silence. We should probably head to class, we said evidently, and the others gradually nodded and moved to get ready in the absence of their friend. Naruto treaded along the dirt path through to the Emerald Forest, making no haste as the pickup was 5 weeks away. Dressed in a black cloak, is perfectly mirrored his mood at having to leave his friends behind, but of course he made no comment or openly displayed it. It looked a good like a good little soldier until he stopped, his sixth sense sending chills straight down his spine. He dug into the natural chakra in the air and expended his senses miles. What he sensed frightened him. Don't even think about it, the fox growled. If they are really here, then they're here for me. I can't just abandon them. You already have. You don't need to give yourself up for people you met less than a year ago, Kurama argued. Naruto huffed and continued walking. He only went a few steps before spinning around and sprinting full force back towards Beacon. Damn my conscience, he yelled out loud. End of chapter 17.